The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS-250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more.
And so one of the things I like to advocate for is those people that make policies to not make sudden changes, because there is, eventually the grid is going to get a lot of solar energy on it, and we're going to have to not get, one-to-one credit and all that kind of stuff. But to go and make it go from like 1 to 1 to 1 to 10 or something like that, it's just crazy, but it does require energy storage to make it work.
Are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our host Tim Montague bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, solar and the NEC. I have a very special guest, a repeat guest. His name is Shawn White. You all know him as Mr. NABCEP. He's a NABCEP trainer. He's an author. He has many books about NABCEP and solar. And he's a trainer on HeatSpring. And he goes around the country and around the world training solar professionals, how to be better solar professionals. So welcome back to the show, Shawn.
Thanks so much, Tim. Yeah, it's been a few weeks since I saw you, since we were at the Oregon Solar Conference.
Yeah.
And they actually had some animals there that we were playing with.
Oh, you made me famous. I'm famous for my goat yoga now.
That was pretty neat, and we could always throw that into it was agrivoltaics also,
That's right.
You got to have your limber goats. But yeah, they did something really weird there where they, and I did it the year before. I just think it's really cool. And they do yoga with goats. And so instead of downward dog, it's downward goat. And you're on your hands and knees, and some little goat climbs on your back. So it was, made the experience memorable.
Luckily, when the goat climbed on my back, it didn't pee and poop on me. So I'm super grateful for that, but it was fun, and it was a great conference. I was so impressed to see how dedicated and knowledgeable the DG community is in Oregon. Most people don't think of Oregon as a robust solar DG market, but it's got some real very experienced solar professionals in that market, and their payback period was surprisingly good. It was like 7 years for C&I. And you can't really ask for a better payback period. I mean, we have a slightly shorter payback period here in Illinois, but we have very generous recs. So met a lot of lovely people. I gave a training on selling and developing commercial solar and storage, and would love to do that again. And then you were telling me you were at MOSEIA. What?
MOSEIA, the Missouri Solar Energy Industry Association.
I've never gone to that, and it's in my backyard. I feel bad for not going to that, but tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really like this, the smaller regional conferences.
Me too.
Because you walk in the room and you could see everybody there, and you can talk to them, and you can get to know them, and you don't get lost in some, like Las Vegas behind, where's all my friends? Oh, there's a bunch of slot machines, There's a bunch of people smoking and playing slot machines, and nothing against the big conferences or anything. I go to those too, but I like that. And then next week I'm going to be at Tennessee, and this time it's going to be in Alabama. So I guess the TVA, that's the Tennessee Valley Authority utility that was, I guess, put up during I think there's actually a song about the TVA, like an old folk song.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it goes back to, like when they were putting America back to work, I think after the Depression in the 30s and all that kind of stuff. So that's always a neat one. I've done that one a bunch of times too, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah, I recently had Gil, the director there at Tennessee, on the show. So we talked a lot about their territory, the Tennessee Valley Authority. It's a very unique ISO, and they have a ton of hydro, they have nuclear, and now they have a fair amount of utility storage. Solar. It's not a real strong DG solar market, but very dynamic market and interesting history. The nuclear industry has a lot of history in that market. Good. I look forward to hearing about that. I'm not going to be able to go myself, but it sounds like they have a good loyal following.
Good group of people, and I've got to see them grow a bit. I think it's been maybe something about, this will be like my 4th or 5th time doing that conference, and they're growing. It's great to see.
Gil Huff is his name. I couldn't remember his last name. I had to look that up. It's Hough. But anyway, cool. So I really want to spend some time talking about solar and the NEC. But before we do that, everyone is asking themselves and others about the incoming Trump administration. We're going to drop this episode. It's mid-November now when we're recording. We're going to drop this in a couple of weeks, though. We're going to expedite publication of this. And, I have my opinions. Everybody has their opinion, but I'm curious, Sean, what you think about the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the incoming Trump administration, because he talked a lot about it in the campaign about attacking the IRA. But then I go, well, wait a minute, this is incentivizing the development of 150 factories in mostly red states across America's breadbasket and across the country. And he's not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But what do you think?
Yeah, so I usually try to stay out of polarizing topics and stuff, and even when I'm talking about like different racking companies, I don't pick a favorite. I'll talk about all of them, or different styles of rapid shutdown and things like that. And I don't really I don't want to offend anybody on either side, because I know there's a lot of good people in the solar industry that are hardcore on one side or the other. And I think that our society is so polarized. And so let me just say that I didn't vote for the red hat guy, but I'm an optimist. And so I want to be, I'm always just I call myself a chronic optimist. So whatever happens, I'm just going to look at the bright side of things and try to figure out why it's not so bad and why it's not the end of the world. And I like to study geopolitics and things like that. And a lot of times, people blame the person, but it's also just the times that make the person. So somebody doing what he was doing, campaigning like he was campaigning in a different time, wouldn't have won. And so now he won, and so that means there's a lot of people behind him, a lot of people that are in the renewable energy industry too. I know a lot of people in the industry, a lot of friends that are, big Trump supporters. And so one of the things is we already survived a Trump administration, and it didn't kill the solar industry. In fact, it grew just like it always does. And we've got to the point too, where solar works really well, as far as, it's the cheapest form of electricity. So if this was happening, 15 years ago, it would have probably been a lot scarier. But then we can even look back, 15 years ago, or something like 2008, I think it was, when we extended the ITC for 8 years. And that was Bush that signed that into law. And so that's, somebody from Texas and fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff. And speaking of Texas and fossil fuels, there's more solar going on in Texas than any other state right now,
right?
Which is obviously,
it's very telling.
And that's where the oil industry is from. I mean, the oil industry kind of rules that state. So they just want to make money and they want cheap electricity. And so we're at a point in time where just the electricity itself being at this price makes things happen. It's always nice to have tax credits. Everybody likes lower taxes, especially the Republicans.
Yep.
So we're going to.
You mentioned Texas, and they not only like cheap electricity, but they like reliable electricity. And what's happening in Texas is a lot of solar and storage, both grid scale storage, but also DG storage. You know, Elon Musk has a company, I think it's called Tesla Energy, that is developing a VPP, a virtual power plant with all these power walls, and consumers can buy in. They get paid $400 a year, and then they have some resiliency, but obviously that virtual power plant is providing grid services, and it's a win-win. So yeah, I love your point that we already survived in a Trump administration, so I don't think it's going to be that different. It is fascinating that he's teamed up with Musk to the degree he has. And I'm curious how long that will last, so to speak, but it is interesting. And obviously Elon is pro-renewables. You know, he talks a lot about the energy transition and the importance of it. And when you think about it strategically, right, this is one of the angles I think that Republicans probably really like is China's going hard after the energy transition. They actually have a big plan to convert their economy to clean energy over the long haul. This is a decades-long plan. Maybe even 100 years. And when you're getting the free sunlight from the sky and powering your society on that, well, that's a strategic advantage and potentially a threat. So if we don't do that, I think we're going to fall behind. And I think smart people understand that. But it's just a great economic opportunity. And now, of course, we're building solar panel factories by the gobs. I'm going to visit Honan Solar's factory in South Carolina in Orangeburg. Shout out to Honan Solar. That's a Chinese company that has built a 1 gigawatt, which is going to scale to 3 gigawatts, I think. They're also building a cell factory, also in South Carolina. And so we see this reshoring and onshoring of solar equipment, which is a wonderful thing because these are high-wage jobs, Sean.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And but that is another thing too, is, you know, as far as the jobs, it might not, you know, we'll see how that works with the unions. I know that speaking of Elon, he wasn't too happy with the prospect of Tesla getting unionized. But that is a good thing that he is in there. So at first, when people see, you know, Elon supporting Trump, they're like, what a traitor and all that. And now that Trump wins, it might be like, well, at least he's there pulling some strings. And who knows how many strings he's going to pull, maybe a lot of them. And, you know, I don't think that he would is going to kill the solar industry or want to see that happen. In fact, at the first Trump administration, when Trump pulled out of the Paris Agreement, he dropped out of the Trump roundtable.
He was on that advisory board, and he said, "Okay, I'm out." And
I have a feeling that he's probably. I almost like wonder if he won't drop out this time. I mean, it's like he says a lot of things, but. You know, it doesn't mean he has to follow through with things. I mean, he's kind of
sure.
You know.
And he really wanted revenge against the Biden administration because they stiff-armed him. They stiff-armed Tesla out of their little EV cabal that they created, right? They were promoting electrification of transportation, the Biden administration was, and they gave Elon the finger, which was pretty rude because Elon pretty much single-handedly created the EV industry in the United States. Thank you, Elon. That is an important transition that we need to make. He proved that you can electrify the consumer vehicle, and now we see, you know, delivery trucks. We see Rivian getting traction, their partnership with VW, a major global car company. The Model Y, Sean, is the #1 selling vehicle globally. It surpassed the Toyota Corolla. Which is just amazing because it's a $60,000 car.
Yeah, I could kind of remember something about that, like maybe about the first year of the Biden administration. There was a big campaign to say the word Tesla, and like they wouldn't say Tesla, and they were at General Motors talking about how they invented the EV industry or something like that. But I guess that made him kind of mad.
Just a little. And he is vengeful. His recent biographer called it demon mode. So Elon, like any human, he has a dark side, and when he's after, you know, when he gets going, he's going to go. All right, well, let's talk about the NEC and solar, because this is something that is on all of
that's a good transition.
The solar industry's mind, okay? The National Electric Code. It's kind of the foundation for a safe, reliable grid. We want a good NEC, and it's not perfect. But anyway, like these things like rapid shutdown are quite dynamic. There's different solutions that become popular, and code does tend to favor some technologies over others. But if you would, because you're so ingrained in this, and you give a regular training on solar and the NEC. If you haven't been to one of those trainings, I highly recommend it. I can't remember your partner's name. You do that with a partner. Who's that?
Brooks.
Bill Brooks.
Yeah, one of the smartest guys in the world.
Another goat in the solar industry.
In fact, if he was running for president, I would have voted for him.
There you go. So what big picture though, Sean, how does the NEC think about solar, and what are some of the trends that are top of mind for you?
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on with the NEC, and what the NEC is it's the rules for electricity where people use it. So it doesn't apply to like utility scale stuff. PV systems over 5 megawatts would apply to Article 691, which points a lot at the NESC, that's the National Electrical Safety Code, which is what the utilities use and things like that, for the power lines that go over your head that are up there at medium voltage, which means thousands of volts and things like that. So the NEC, I mean, there's a whole ton to it. It has to do with the receptacles in your walls and things like that. And we look a lot at Article 690, that's solar photovoltaic systems, Article 705, interconnected power production sources, and Article 706, that's energy storage systems. And speaking of 690 and rapid shutdown, which is kind of famous for being called 690.12, rapid shutdown, and it's not just called rapid shutdown, it's called rapid shutdown of PV systems on buildings. So it's only for PV systems on buildings. And the reason that they made it is because, let me just kind of give you an example. I was living in the mountains 10 years ago in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and along came a big fire that was like 50 miles by 50 miles. A huge fire came right at where I was living. We didn't even know if our house burned down for a week or something like that. And fortunately, our house didn't burn down, and our neighbor's did. He had solar on his roof, and we had a ground mount. And perhaps the firefighters were coming in there going, which house do we have time to save? And they're like, I don't want to get shocked. And I don't understand that new kind of weird electricity stuff that the sun makes this thing turn on, and I might get shocked. And so one of the reasons that they put rapid shutdown in there was so our insurance rates wouldn't go up for having PV systems. So there's a lot of rapid shutdown haters out there, and that just wish that we didn't have it, and most of the countries in the world don't have it. But we do have a lot of wooden houses, so things are a little bit different here. And we do respect our firefighters a lot, especially after 9/11 and things like that. And so there's some different ways to apply rapid shutdown. And there are ways of doing it with module level electronics. And that's been the most popular way of doing it for a long time. So you're talking about micro inverters that are just like one inverter per PV module, or we're talking about something like Solar Edge, where they have an optimizer, which is officially called a DC to DC converter. And there's also something called a TIGO, APS, lots of different devices that can do that. And a lot of times these devices, it's like once you're putting electronics up there, you might as well do something else, like optimize the power, be able to monitor on a module level. There's a lot of other different ways of doing that. And then along came some companies that figured out a way around module level. And that's what a lot of people are calling UL 3741. Some of the people that originally wrote the rapid shutdown rules and all that are kind of against that way of doing it, where it's array level shutdown. And so now there's some systems out there that after shutdown can stay up to full voltage, which is 600 volts residential, 1,000 volts for commercial buildings, not more than 1 and 2 family dwellings. So they could stay up to those higher voltages after shutdown, which gets people a little bit concern.
So here's the trend that I see, and I ride at a much higher level. I'm at the 30,000 foot level. I'm doing system design. I'm looking over my clients' shoulders, helping them with designs, but I'm no code jockey. But I saw the rise of MLPEs, right? Okay, module level power electronics were a way to attack rapid shutdown, and they became quite de rigueur. They became quite popular. There's a double edge with MLPEs. You're inserting a bunch of extra electronics or points of failure. You're inserting a bunch of extra points of connection, literally MC4 connectors, because all these devices need to be connected. Now, it does have some nice benefits, right? The SolarEdge optimizer, if you have a complicated roof with a lot of shading, those things are lovely, and they help you get the most out of your array in a very sophisticated way. But guess what? If you're working on a ginormous, let's say 1 million square feet of flat roof, you don't really want to install MLPEs because it's so much labor, so many extra boxes that you have to install. You'd much rather just do a big string inverter, a 100 kW, or even now, in some cases, a 200 kW string inverter. And so now there's this trend back away from MLPEs that is allowed. Okay, the new rules do allow for these systems to remain at a higher voltage. You said the array level, right? Yeah. And it's a both and now. You can attack the problem multiple ways. And I do think that the SolarEdges and the microinverter companies are feeling a little defensive. I've heard them on one of my favorite shows. That's Barry Cinnamon's The Energy Show. He's interviewed both SolarEdge, and who's the popular microinverter company? Enphase. He had the Enphase CEO on 2 shows, and he had some senior executive from SolarEdge, and they were quite defensive. Understandable, but guess what? It's a big market, Sean, and as you pointed out, right, we're just growing. We're going to 10x the solar industry in the next 20 years. Solar is going to be 50% of our grid power by 2050. It'll be 50% solar, 40% wind, and 10% other.
We should lay bets on that. I'm going to bet bigger.
Okay. Well, bigger than 50%?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
I like the complement of solar and wind, right? Because in the winter, for example, when the sun isn't shining as much, the wind is really blowing. Here on the prairie, we have a lot of wind going on, and when you look at those annual graphs, it's like, yeah, in the summer, the solar's like this, and the wind is like this, and then in the winter, the solar's more flat, and the wind is cooking. And same, there's this day-night cycle also where the wind tends to blow more at night. Anyway, I don't want to live in the shadow of a big wind farm. I don't want to have a wind turbine blowing on my rooftop. I'd rather have a solar array on my roof. But
I just had an idea. They have space solar that they're working on. Maybe we could have space wind. What do you think?
Space wind. That would be difficult because you don't have an atmosphere in space. You have a solar wind.
How do you know? You've never been there. You probably think the Earth is a globe or something.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 3-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes 3-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS-250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more. I am a fan of collecting solar photons in space, right, and then beaming them back to Earth. We just have to figure out how not to cook the birds because I am a little worried about the birds flying through that beam. But otherwise, it's a thing. And the Chinese are experimenting with this. The U.S. is experimenting with this. It's very experimental. And I think heretofore it's been cost prohibitive, but I don't doubt that eventually it'll be a thing.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting that PG&E had a contract for space solar that was supposed to take place in 2016. with a company called SolarN, and it never happened. And they say it was because of the financial crisis and,
yeah,
probably some politics. But it's kind of interesting. And now they're actually researching it and doing it. But yeah, a little bit back to the rapid shutdown too. So there's this thing called UL3741.
Yep.
And you could get a microinverter listed to UL3741. In fact, they already have microinverters, because if you took an in-phase microinverter that put 2 modules in series, that's above module level shutdown, and that is listed to UL3741. So UL3741 is just called PV Hazard Control Systems. They came out with it I think it was December of 2020. It takes people a while to start developing products to do it. And then they got, I think it was Intertech that's first listed the first one that was like SMA, Iron Ridge, Solega, and Raytray, and Hellerman Titan, and all these different companies all together. You have to put it together just like this on the system level. It had to get listed.
Right.
And it was like, wow, look at this. It does rapid shutdown, and it's still 1,000 volts after shutdown with metal frames on the PV modules, which, some people that helped write that standard says that's not the way that it's supposed to be, but the industry is strong. And there's a guy too that I had on my podcast. Do you know Solar Boy, Derek Mass?
Oh yeah, I've met Derek.
Yeah. And he's a fun guy. You should give him one of your shirts because it matches his beard.
It's true.
He has a purple beard, serious guy. But he went out and he got UL3741.com. And so you can see, and he's very much of a strong advocate against the people having to do module level shutdown. Oh. And there's another guy that I call a string inverter activist, and his name is Peter Greenberg, and he's up in Oregon. I'm sure, yeah, you know him. We were just hanging out with him. And I have a picture of him with a shirt on it, and he has like some module level shutdown devices, and it wasn't Solar Edge or Enphase, but it's some other devices that caught fire on one of his jobs. Yep. Plus the newspaper article of how his job got on the front page of the newspaper of a school catching fire. It didn't burn down, but it caught fire. And so I call him a string inverter activist because, and it's like in his case, it's like the thing that's supposed to protect firefighters caused the fire, or something, so it's, there's a lot of pluses and minuses. So I'm not, against module level electronics. There's different ways of doing it. And the industry pretty much shifted to at first Solar Edge had the majority of the jobs, and then Enphase was number one. And now we see a lot of things changing and shifting. And I know that Enphase just did some layoffs, and you could say, like, some people were saying like, oh, it's because of the election, but also I would imagine it also probably has somewhat to do with UL 3741 systems that are doing array level shutdown.
Possible. I still think there's room in the solar economy for MLPEs. I think they're going to continue to be very popular in residential and small commercial. I just think if you're making that journey to become a large CNI solar installer, you need to contact me, because I will help you with that playbook. Okay, there's totally different equipment used in large CNI, Sean. Different modules, different racking, different inverters, different software for running cash flows, for generating proposals, for doing O&M, monitoring. So it's like there's these parallel universes. And then I love companies that go after both. I mean, Barry Cinnamon's a good example. He does residential and commercial solar. And he's doing batteries. He's doing electrification of HVAC. That's his niche there. Some solar companies are also becoming roofing companies. Have you run into any of those?
What's funny is when I had my first full-time job in the solar industry, it was being the solar division at a roofing company. And the other guy that was the solar guy that was working with me was Stuart Wentworth. And I don't know, he was the guy that invented quick mount. So he invented the square piece of metal.
Oh, cool.
He was a genius and struck it rich after doing that. Now he's retired. I see him around once in a while. But
yes, he is.
Yeah, so like roofing companies, another good friend of mine, Tony Diaz, he's an electrician and a roofer. I think he's been doing solar for probably at least 20 years. He does even a lot of BIPV because he has his roofing skills, and he has customers that can afford it in Silicon Valley and things like that. And he
BI meaning bifacial?
Oh, BIPV, building integrated.
Oh, building integrated. Sorry, yes, of course.
Yeah. So, like
but what? Tell me about that. Like, what is you're talking about GAF Energy?
He's done it with lots of different companies and stuff. In fact, one time there was a product about 15 years ago that they don't make anymore, and it caught fire. And because of the connections and the heat underneath the BIPV, because there's not as much airflow and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more connections. You're talking about connectors.
Yeah.
And so there was some fires, not with his systems, with somebody else's, and he actually started a class action lawsuit, and they had to go reinstall all of their systems.
Whoa. We had GAF Energy on the show. Check out episode 146 with Ray Holmes and Sean O'Reilly. Ray works for GAF. Great
names.
And he came from Tesla. And then Sean works for an installer. I can't remember the name of that installer, but I'll find it here.
And GAF, that's a big roofing product manufacturer.
The largest roofing product manufacturer globally, I think. Yeah, they've got a beautiful nailable solar shingle. I like it that it uses the installation technology that roofers are used to, right? They want to nail those shingles, and this is a solar shingle that's nailable. It's a little different format, of course, and it's got wires, and so you do need to hire an electrician. And their strategy at GAF is to work to partner with installers to kind of like do this deep partnership, and then they will assist and help them find electricians, and the roofer is not becoming the electrician, right? But I mean, some MC4 connections can be made by roofers. It's not rocket science, but getting the system wired to the grid, that's another matter, right? You need a qualified electrician to do that stuff, and that's all well and good. I'm glad you brought up BIPV. BIPV is near and dear to my heart. I think it is the future. If you go to Northern Europe, you see much more BIPV. They're much more space constrained, and solar's just 10 years further along because energy is expensive there. They're further along on electrification of transportation. They're further along on renewable energy.
Yeah, and I believe they have incentives that pay extra for BIPV solar energy.
I hope so, because it is expensive.
Like in Germany. So that is the problem with things like BIPV, is because it costs a lot more. And you look at like a regular rectangular framed module system, and one of those goes up on a house in a day, and BIPV takes a lot longer. And it takes roofing expertise, and roofing isn't easy, and you don't want it to leak. And then if there's an electrical problem, how do you troubleshoot that? And then they have rapid shutdown too. So my friend Tony Diaz, Century Roof and Solar in Hayward, California, is he uses microinverters. The last time I talked to him, underneath the BIPV.
Yep.
And then now he does rapid shutdown and all that kind of stuff. He has to find room to put the microinverters. I'm not sure exactly how he does it.
Yeah. Do you know what solar shingle he's using?
I am not sure.
Yeah. And you know, Elon is famous in this space as well with the Tesla solar shingle. It's a very sexy product, but guess what? It's also very complicated to install. The installers don't really like it. It's extremely expensive. It's like, yeah, if I was a millionaire, I would go for it. But it's really good for new construction. It's not great for retrofitting because it's the whole roof. Whereas you take a shingle roof that's got 20 years of life in it, boom, just slap some solar panels on it. I think it looks fine. If you do black on black solar panels, looks great. If you hide the conduit, I don't like to see conduit running all over the place. So, you know,
or painted or something.
Make a penetration, do it right, get it into the attic.
A big benefit too is like airflow gets rid of the heat out of the PV modules. And so if you have your PV modules lifted off the top of the roof, and it's going to get more airflow than BIPV, and that way you get better performance. And another thing is, before you even turn that system on, it lowers your air conditioning bill because your roof is cooler when the sun hits the PV. So
yeah, it's like a sunshade for your roof in a way.
One time I was on a train in China, and I was like, what is that? And I was like, that looks like sort of solar, but it wasn't. And they had like this little sunshade that was sort of like about the same height as solar off the top of the roof with air
Oh,
getting out from underneath it to prevent the roof from heating up too much.
oh, cool.
It
Huh.
was like a fake, fake solar. I think it was made out of concrete even. But,
Yeah. Wow.
uh,
All right. Well, I'm glad we geeked out on UL 3741. And you mentioned Solar Boy. Check out Solarboy, SOLARBOI.com. And we'll have to get Derek on the show. I've never had him on the show. I'd love to.
yeah. Yeah. You got to get Tony Diaz too, the roofer electrician guy. He's a really good guy.
Okay. I would love that. So please make an intro for frankly, for both. I don't know if I have Derek's contact info. We've spoken at conferences periodically. And he's a big fan of Ryan Mayfield. He references Ryan's article on UL 3741. So check out Mayfield. Mayfield Renewables is the company. It's mayfield.energy. And Ryan was just on a webinar with me. He's also been on the show. He's really into training in the solar space also. So check out mayfield.energy. We did a webinar on safety in grid scale batteries. So he's also deep into batteries, microgrids. And I guess that's something else that you and I should talk about in our last couple of minutes together, Sean, is the attachment rates of storage, both in the residential and commercial space, is going up. I heard on Barry's show that in California now, in his geography, 90% of solar projects are getting batteries.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of it has to do with the net metering policy. And so, like, I was just in Missouri, and they have what they call one-to-one net metering. So you get full credit for exporting, sort of like what we had in California. And then when we got net metering 3 or net billing 3, whatever they want to call it, NEM 3.0,
Yep.
all of a sudden, one night at midnight, the policy completely changed. And so one of the things I like to advocate for is those people that make policies to not make sudden changes, because there is, eventually the grid is going to get a lot of solar energy on it, and we're going to have to not get, one-to-one credit and all that kind of stuff. But to go and make it go from like 1 to 1 to 1 to 10 or something like that, it's just crazy. But it does require energy storage to make it work. So you're making more electricity than you're using in the middle of the day when you're not home and things like that. Or, it could be different if you're in a building and at different times of the day and things like that. And so instead of exporting it, you do what's called self-consumption, and you put it inside the battery. And so one of the things that happened when California stopped giving you credit for exporting, or any decent amount of credit for exporting, it was really good for the energy storage industry. I would imagine somebody from the energy storage industry might have been lobbying for that, along with the utilities. But it did really upset a lot of people in the solar industry. I saw some kind of study that was saying that was like something in the magnitude of like 20,000 jobs were lost when that happened. And then that's could be one of the main reasons too why Texas is overtaking California, where California used to always be half of the solar industry.
Yep.
And so that's why energy storage is really big in some places, because you just can't make it work financially without it.
Yeah, I think Texas actually has become such a big market because of all the utility solar happening in Texas. Gobs and gobs of big utility scale solar and now batteries. The thing,
yeah, good for them, but
Yeah.
just for California, bad for us, because we didn't grow as fast as we have been. We are, we're letting other
Yeah,
states
no,
grow
NEM
faster.
3.0 has been a wrecking ball for the solar industry, especially the residential solar industry, and it was a perfect storm. Inflation rates were high, so consumers were stressed, and then NEM 3 hit, and the resi solar industry collapsed by 70%, I think, in 2023. So it's been a tough time the last 12 months.
That's terrible to just make a big, huge change in policy
Yeah.
all at once overnight. I remember what we used to call the Jolly Green Governor, the governator, Arnold himself. And there was the California Solar Initiative, and I think it was like 1 million roofs was the goal, and we met it and all that kind of stuff. And there were these rebates, and they dropped down gradually. So it wasn't like this overnight change. And it was like the rebates dropped down as the price of solar went down, and it worked out perfectly. And having huge sudden changes, it's always good when there's a huge sudden change going up and it increases business, but it just puts us on that solar coaster, and it makes layoffs, and people can't invest in things because they don't know what the future is going to bring. And so policy people, knock it off, make gradual changes. That's what I like to say.
I'm with you. I love net metering. We're losing our full retail net metering here in Illinois at the end of the year, and it is going to be hard on the resi industry. But because we have RECs, it's going to be okay. And then for commercial, it's not a big change because we've already had when in Illinois, if you take the smart inverter rebate as a system owner, then you're getting effectively net billing, and that's been in the works. That's been part of the system. So for commercial, it's basically no change, but for resi, it's going to take about 10 to 20% of the value of the system away when they go to net billing.
Yeah.
And so this is a trend all across the country, though, Sean, as the solar markets mature, net metering gets stepped on, and the utility wins. And eventually, I think the utilities will be disrupted because we're so fed up with the slow interconnection, the expensive interconnection, the lack of good net metering rules, the lack of incentive to build a microgrid. Like, we all want community scale microgrids, which is actually good for the utilities because they get to build infrastructure, but they're building it at scale. And then you have that resiliency for when there's a storm or a fire or a flood. And clearly, right, we've seen so many times in Texas and in California, those are the two big dogs when it comes to storms and grid outages. It's brutal, and people die, and the economy tanks. I mean, it's very expensive, and people die. So we want more microgrids, and I just think that if the utilities don't get with it, so to speak, that we will just disrupt them. So with that, we're out of time, Sean. I want to thank you for coming on the show, though. Check out his work on NEC, though, if you're ever at a regional conference or the national conference, right? It was called SPI. Now it's called
RE+.
RE+. And it's going to be in Vegas again next year?
Yeah, it's going to be in Vegas.
I hate that.
And then we also have Intersolar coming up in February.
Yes.
In San Diego. And so those are the two bigger ones that we'll see. We also have RE+ regional conferences. And so last year and probably next year, I did Massachusetts, the one in Boston, and there was another one in Texas that I did, teaching the NEC workshops at those conferences too.
Yep, and I just came from RE+ Midwest last week in Chicago. I should have said that at the beginning of the show, I guess. Lovely event. That's been growing. It had to change venues now. About 1,000 people there, I'm guessing. So it's on par now with RE+ Northeast. We're chasing RE+ Northeast, which is also growing. That's a great show in Boston. I look forward to seeing you in February in San Diego, Sean. We're definitely going to have to rent that sailboat this time, though, okay?
That sounds like a great idea. Yep, you mean that really big, huge sailboat that was like $1 million a day or something like that?
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Millionaire sailboat that, like, no problem. Let's do it.
You're the NABCEP millionaire, so it's all good. All right. Well, thank you, Sean. How can our listeners find you on the interwebs?
The best place to find me is Solar Sean. That's solar, SEAN.com. And I have my email. I have my phone number there. And I teach a lot of classes over at HeatSpring. That's kind of mostly what I do, NABCEP exam prep, getting people certified so they can get their name searchable on the NABCEP website.
Excellent. Well, I'm Tim Montague. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Give us a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify, please. Just do it. Do it on your phone. Do it on your computer. Tell a friend about the show. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love hearing from my listeners. And with that, I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Tim. Let's grow.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, the maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 6 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS America product lineup includes three-phase string inverters ranging from 25 to 275 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS-250-275, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. The 250-275 pairs well with CPS America's exceptional data communication, controls, and energy storage solutions. Go to chintpowersystems.com to find out more.